The Morning Majority with Brian Neiman, Mary Catherine Ham, and Brian Wilson on 630 WMAL.
8:37 on The Morning Majority. Christopher Horner joins us now. He's Senior Fellow at Competitive Enterprise Institute, CEI for short. He's written 2 books on global warming. Morning, Christopher.
Good morning.
President Obama is naming John Bryson to be the next head of commerce, and some Republicans, especially Senator Jim Inhofe, are upset about that. Are you in the same camp as Inhofe is saying that he should not be the next head of commerce, and if so, why is he such a bad choice?
Well, I suppose it's more in sorrow than anger, but I don't quite understand the choice. My first response was very curious. That is, the president is bringing up for the re-elect his ever-popular cap-and-trade scheme, which this guy was a major proponent of, the stimulus, which this guy's company was a, so I would say, dependent company on, and the green job scheme, shall I say scam. That is, the companies which would not exist but for wealth transfers from the public. The guy's got it all wrapped up in one, and it struck me as an odd choice. Remember, this isn't the head of EPA. This is Commerce Secretary, whose business record involves working for a rent-seeking monopolist and then a stimulus-dependent industry. That may be the new American model of business, but that's not been the traditional successful American model of business.
I understand the concern about the head of the EPA when it comes to global warming, but what about commerce? I mean, where is the hazard there? If he's head of commerce, what can he do to sneak things past without Congress approving bills?
Oh, well, NOAA is under Commerce, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. We're about to file against NOAA because they're withholding documents from us about the UN's IPCC, which they are the lead agency involved in, and so forth. So Commerce actually has a tremendous role in the agenda. But what I think, and this is what the Washington insiders listening might be thinking about, right now, through the re-elect, the president is going to be delaying some EPA rules, okay? And he needs to hold together the coalition of these companies that are supporting him, these utilities that want the cap-and-trade scheme and so on, and the green groups who are going to face disappointment, girding themselves for disappointment in delaying these rules until past the re-elect, because you don't want this economic impact to be felt yet. And who better to hold it together? And that would be somebody at Commerce who, remember, they have an enormous bag of money to hand out. They do that. And he's also somebody who has a foot in each camp. So in that way, from a very three-level chess, politically savvy way, that may be the way the president approached it. That may be the benefit to him. But otherwise, remember, this will be the only, I suggest, confirmation fight between now and the election. And Senator Inhofe has signaled that it will be a fight. And the president, therefore, has to go to the mat for a pro-cap-and-trade, pro-green jobs, very pro-stimulus guy. That was a curious move.
Well, and if there were to be some regulatory overreach from this guy with NOAA, it wouldn't be the first time we've seen that from the Obama administration.
No, he won't be breaking the seal on that.
Right.
In fact, regulatory overreach would be, I would put it on the tombstone after the first and maybe only term, because that's what defines them. There's a guy at a local university who has characterized the Obama administration very well, if unintentionally, and that was a guy, George Mason, who said, when Congress resists action, regulation provides the way forward. That's an actual quote in the Washington Post from, did I mention he's an academic? That's not really the way the Constitution lays it out, as I recall, but when Congress resists action, the unelected bureaucrats who feel they've waited too long and are tired of waiting provide a way forward. That's the way they're proceeding now on cap and trade, among other issues. So this is a guy, remember, the cabinet secretary came from California originally, where he was head of a utility that was known as the master of the regulatory game in an industry that they worked with the regulators to increase their own costs because they get to pass it all through with a taste on top. This is an inside player, but the problem is his view of business is he understands the needs of the rent-seeking monopolist, if not so much the needs of us.
I'm going to ask you one more question about the Newsweek cover this week, which is titled subtly Weather Panic, and it has a very scary tornado bearing down on a very small house. It says, this is the new normal, and we're hopelessly unprepared. Have you read that story? I've glanced at it. It doesn't sound like there are a super lot of facts involved.
Yeah, no, the facts are for losers in this debate, Mary Catherine. I read that story several times when I was growing up in Time magazine in the 70s about cooling causing everything. We've gone from a world where something happening was evidence of something happening to now being something happening being proof you did it, you made it happen. That's the ice mass on Mount Kilimanjaro is melting because of global warming. How do you know? The ice mass on Mount Kilimanjaro is melting. That's akin to the CIA brought the World Trade Centers down. How do you know? The World Trade Centers came down. It's not an argument. It's a rhetorical trick. The one thing you would not expect from global warming theory is more tornadoes or more violent thunderstorms just because of the physics of it. You don't see, to overly simplify, tornadoes in the tropics. In fact, we've seen a reduced number of severe tornadoes over the 50 years since 1950. We've been paying closer attention. You don't need advanced Doppler radar to capture these guys, of course. And that was during the slight warming that ended about 10 years ago.
Christopher, getting back to the confirmation battle that's looming, we have seen a statement from James Inhofe, Republican from Oklahoma, saying that he will work actively to defeat the nomination. He also goes on to say that Bryson comes from what he calls a radical environmental organization. Can he get some resonance on that? In other words, can he be successful in actually blocking this nomination? I know that's a political judgment rather than a scientific judgment, but you've been around this town. What's your sense?
I would say that, for example, my first question, I posted something up on a website saying, oh, NRDC, you mean the group I walked into a meeting in Enron's offices in 1997 trying to figure out how to get a global warming treaty and a domestic cap-and-trade scheme? That NRDC. They were around with Enron when Enron created this. I know because I was with Enron for a glorious 3 weeks when that was my job. Didn't care for the idea, and that relationship didn't last. But NRDC, everything they've done or are doing in an anti-energy, anti-growth agenda sticks to this gentleman's heels. He helped start them. It's a very activist, litigious group. So that is something that you can bring into the debate. Remember, he was still supporting cap and trade. He called Waxman-Markey a modest bill, the thing to cause electricity rates to necessarily skyrocket. So I think that Senator Inhofe could very easily, just by talking about the groups the guy's associated with, Bright Source Energy, a stimulus-dependent company. These are things that don't really work. It's a curious choice to go to the mat for in the only confirmation fight before the reelection.
The things that you're concerned that Bryson may do, did you see Gary Locke, the outgoing Commerce Secretary, doing any of those things?
No, I think his focus was elsewhere. I think this was a bit of a departure. They're not exactly cut from the same mold. Gary Locke was focused to Asia and export opportunities, it seemed, and this gentleman has been a much more of a domestic regulatory inside gamer, designing these cost-plus systems whereby the regulated can work with regulators to fleece the taxpayer. That's what you can call a lot of these businesses. So
right.
It's a completely different profile.
I wanted to quickly ask you about the WHO came out yesterday saying that cell phones may in fact cause cancer, or you have a higher chance of getting cancer if you use a cell phone on a regular basis. What do you think of that report yesterday from the WHO?
My first response before reading the summary was that it was like voting in the European Union. You just keep doing it until you get the right answer. Now it looks like they just claim an association. We had a 10-year, $30 million study just last year, 13 nations in which they claimed an association. Once again, the takeaway is, I don't know, better safe than sorry.
All right, Christopher, good to have you on the show. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Christopher Horner, Senior Fellow at Competitive Enterprise Institute.